Gender-exclusive Pokemon hide tons of interesting secrets about ecology and myths. From male combee being amazing workers, even though real male bees can't even feed themselves, why Kangaskhan always has a baby in its pouch no matter how old it is, and even why special legendary Pokemon like the Genie Quartet have a gender at all. All these secrets and more will be revealed today as I bring to you every gender-exclusive Pokemon explained. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, connecting the world through Pokemon. It's one thing to have sexual dimorphism in Pokemon, which is the visual difference between male and female Pokemon of the same species, but it's another to have Pokemon that are exclusively one gender. How do they reproduce without a Ditto? Do they even do so? Why are they exclusively that gender, and why did they evolve to be this way? Let's see if we can answer these questions, and let's jump in with the first Pokemon you likely thought of when you clicked on this video, excluding the thumbnail, Nidoran male and female. Females look blue while the males are purple in color, but that color difference surprisingly means very little when it comes to the animal kingdom. Their colors are rarer in nature and ultimately don't blend in very well, so they're put into more danger than you might imagine. This results in them developing very highly distinct traits over time. One where we have a more docile female that is better at sniffing out food, while we have a more aggressive male that will protect female Nidoran at any cost while using their giant rabbit ears to hear any oncoming predators. To make it clear, these are very much rabbits at the start. Their large ears and buck teeth should give that away, but they get pretty monstrous later on. For now, they're living their life as the female is a great forager and the male is a great defender. As they do evolve, Nidorina loses the ability to have eggs, but this isn't anything negative. In fact, this is representative of this Pokemon being pregnant. Congratulations, Nidorina, you're going to be a mother to a litter of happy baby Nidoran. We know this, by the way, because most of its Pokédex info talks about how it cares for its young, not how it is going to care for its young, as it chews up their food first before spitting it out to their offspring, or retracting its quills and barbs around its friends and family as to not hurt them. This Pokemon has become specialized towards becoming more caring overall, and it really shows from behavior to abilities. In addition, not being able to have an egg isn't representative of not actually being able to breed at all. As it turns out, the egg is more like a container of sorts, rather than the actual birthing process, so luckily the mammals of the Pokemon world don't necessarily all actually have eggs birthed from them. Speaking of abilities though, these lines of Pokemon have the rivalry ability, meaning they actively compete against each other for mates. The only time I've personally ever seen this with these Pokemon is when we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga and see it directly before Red accidentally captures a Nidoqueen and enrages both of the Nidoking vying for her love. Nidorina is so strongly adapted towards caring for others that not only does the horn on its head grow slower than Nidorino, it also gets incredibly nervous when not around others. If a group is ever disturbed, they're apparently able to deter threats using a chorus of ultrasonic cries, according to the Shield Pokédex at the very least. Opposing this, though, is of course the more aggressive Nidorino. It has been built to protect and to fight, being quick to react as a very aggressive Pokemon. Its ears are still vital to keep aware of its surroundings, but it has developed a horn harder than diamond and incredible venom that oozes from said horn. That's a pretty long horn too, by the way. I'm willing to bet that that sucker is about 4 inches long on average, which would roughly be the length of 2 thumbs. Definitely don't want to get hit by that, or pierced by it even, I'd say. Though when it isn't fighting, it is actively destroying boulders as it searches for the one thing that will make it evolve into a stronger creature, the Moonstone. This actually implies that Nidorino is not just looking for a Moonstone for itself, but also for Nidorina as well. After all, we don't really learn about Nidorina searching for these stones, and it's far too busy with the children at home, but what's the purpose? Well, it's for it to become a much larger and stronger Nidoqueen and bear more children, of course. It is the basic rule of nature. Eat, spawn more children, then die. Get yourself the shirt, by the way. In all seriousness though, we see that Nidoqueen is a bit rounder, but that's not to insult this Pokemon in the slightest. More meat on the bones for a wild animal means that the environment supports them and that there's an abundance of food, meaning that more children can safely be had to allow the genes of the parents to have a better chance at surviving throughout history and throughout events of the world. Also, Nidoqueen has always been strangely endowed with some booba. So there's no way I could just ignore this whole idea, especially since she'd just be adjusting her boobs on release from a Pokeball in Pokemon Stadium. Like, I get it, the girls get uncomfy sometimes. If only they could just be removed for ease, like glasses are, or something. She has become an incredibly powerful mother that is fully capable of protecting her offspring on her own, becoming incredibly fierce, if not fiercer, than Nidoking when enraged by those that threaten her young. Though it is noted that Nidoqueen is more adept at being defensive than offensive. Her armor-like scales allow it to defend its children from any attack, all while poisoning her foes that do come into contact with her. This is a phenomenal trait, because the Pokédex goes further to state that even though they are massive Pokemon that now take traits from kaiju rhinos, they still burrow into the ground for their dens. And because of this, Nidoqueen is able to block the entrance to the den with her body in order to protect her children. Now, you might wonder, what Pokemon would attack a Nidoqueen? But that's the trick. They aren't interested in her. Rather, much like sharks attacking baby whales, there are plenty of predator Pokemon who will actively seek out baby Pokemon, or even Pokemon still in eggs, in order to get their fill of food. But if you want to know more about the Pokemon food chain, you can watch that video right after you finish this one. Opposite to Nidoqueen, as you would expect, Nidoking has roided out to become an absolute terror on the battlefield. It gets shredded with muscles, but still has a bit of a lower belly in order to help protect all those organs. But don't be fooled, I guarantee that lower belly is still able to take an incredible hit without Nidoking feeling a thing. It swings its tail with enough force to break radio transmission towers to keep foes at bay before charging them headfirst with that horn capable of crushing diamonds. Adding to that, it can release highly corrosive acid from its claws, according to the manga, and it will crush the bones of its prey once it has them in its grasp. Now, I've always wondered this. Why crush their bones? Many creatures in our world, and even in Pokemon, don't bother with doing this. Instead, they just, eat the meat, leave the bones behind, move on with their day. Well, there's only one explanation. Nidoking is providing for its family. While you might claim Nidoran male and female only eat berries, their diets will eventually have to change to include meat as they become Nidorino and Nidorina. A high-protein diet allows them to develop better towards their final evolution. I'd even argue that they might even eat more meat than adults during their growing stages, and then only when they reach an old age in their Nidoqueen and Nidoking stages do they shift back to having a more omnivorous rather than carnivorous diet. We can support this idea of Nidoking providing for its family with one detail. Only a Nidoqueen can calm down Nidoking when he enters a rampage. I'm sorry, but that's just making me think of the cringe, a king only bows down to his queen. Like, yes, that can be a sweet thing if you say it right or put it in the right context, but it's so often just used by, idiot knuckleheads that want to justify being mean to everyone except their significant other, which, as a side note, is an incredibly unattractive trait to see your significant other be mean towards people who don't deserve it. But back on track, these are incredibly diverse traits that make themselves apparent through the male and female counterparts. These are necessary adaptations towards the survival of their species, because there are plenty of other Pokemon who have the same habits whether they are male or female. But in the case of these Pokemon, the diverse personalities and skills are what have driven the Nidoran lines towards success in continuing their species. In the most basic sense, I always like to say that Gallade is the gallant knight, while Gardevoir is a knight of its own. You thought I would say it was a princess, didn't you? Which, yes, normally I would, as they definitely feel as though they take on Link and Zelda stereotypes in some capacity, one being more physically offensive while the other is magically offensive. But here's the catch. Gardevoir's Japanese name is Sir Knight, as if to say Sir Knight, or Sa Naito in Japanese, telling the knights to come along. Gardevoir can be male or female, while Gallade can only be male, but why was this distinction made? Why can't female Ralts grow up to be sword masters if male Ralts are able to grow up to become ballroom dress-wearing magicians? Well, outside of the joke that women don't have a sword to master, Gallade is given a more Greek-like motif to it, bearing a fin on its head that would then work with its head shape to look like a Roman gladiator's helmet. Typically, only men were allowed to be gladiators, but there were some very incredibly rare women who took on the role of a gladiator. They were spectacles in battle, and understandably so, because they were often described as being Amazonian, which only makes me imagine someone who outclasses the average gladiator with ease. So sure, there could have been a female Gallade, but they decided against it. And that's just the tip of this little iceberg, because while both of them still use psychic power, they use it in different ways. For example, Gardevoir's bond with its trainer allows it to open its heart completely to emotions and unleash its strongest psychic attacks. Meanwhile, for Gallade, it still derives strength from its trainer as any other Pokemon and Mega Pokemon would, but it makes an extra emphasis on this in its Pokédex for a reason. A knight abides by a code traditionally, with Gallade being noted to always be on guard to protect those that are in need even when it should be sleeping. As a result, whatever version of a moral code that Gallade would have is what drives its Mega Evolution even further, and it uses its psychic powers to predict its opponent's moves, allowing it to strike first. Long story short, he's got observation hockey and a moral code. Ultimately, their personalities are the same, or at least their base personality and reasoning behind anything they do. They form bonds with people and trainers, derive power from it, and then use all of this power to protect their trainer and loved ones. It's just how they use it, physically or specially, that allowed them to take on these forms. Since we've already talked about one Pokemon that evolves via the Dawnstone, we may as well talk about another one with Froslass. Its counterpart Glalie can be male or female, since it's just a general spirit that was lost on the mountains and passed away, or a rock that was filled with many regrets. But Froslass can only be female, since it is nearly a 1-to-1 copy of the tail of the Yuki-onna. Even its Japanese name is Yuki Minoko, combining Yuki-onna and Minoko together, which is just effectively snow woman girl if you break it down and go with the literal translation. From friends over at yokai.com though, Yuki-onna spend their lives hunting humans in the snow. They stay near mountain roads and prey on the travelers that come and go, or break into homes and flash freeze the inhabitants during the night. While they are killers, Yuki-onna are not entirely cold-blooded. I got the pun. Legends say they can fall in love with their intended prey and let them go free. Some go as far as to marry humans and live happily together. As supernatural spirits never age, however, their husbands inevitably discover their true identities. This revelation usually ends these happy marriages. One story they share is when a Yuki-onna gave in and took a bath on a particularly cold day at request of her husband, and all that was left were icicles when he came back. Another story is one of the oldest, where a man survived an event from a Yuki-onna, one of those flash freezings, married her unknowingly, as she had disguised herself as a beautiful young woman that he had, quote-unquote, coincidentally met, and originally he had only lived because he promised to never tell anyone about her. Well, guess what? He told his wife about her, which was the Yuki-onna herself, but nevertheless, he still broke his promise, and this time she only lets him live unharmed because they have children together. But if he ever hurts them, it's lights out. By comparison, this all follows the traits of Froslass. We even get to see it being protective of snowruns in the anime. She freezes men who misbehave, uses them as decorations, and eats their frozen souls as her favorite meal. Just a little snack if you would. And when it does Mega Evolve, it continues to follow this tale of the Yuki-onna, as I asked friend of the channel, Pokesudami, a while back if she knew anything regarding the kimono and its significance, and she actually pointed out that it lines up with one that would be worn at a wedding. Honestly, all of the differences just derive from the idea of Pokemon already having an ice demon in the form of Glalie in Gen 3, and it honestly is a more traditionally masculine looking Pokemon, rough features and all. So why not make an ice demon that's more traditionally feminine? And the easy tie was of course by looking at the Yuki-onna. Looking at their base stat totals, Glalie has a perfect 80 in all of its stats, and that's because it's a well-rounded individual. Literally, it's a ball. You'd expect this to be another scenario, though, where the male is more of a physical attacker, while the female is a special attacker, but nope. Froslass is just better in everything, except for health. And that's not even that much of a difference, actually. In their Mega forms, at least Glalie does have a solid attack and special attack, with Mega Froslass beating it only in special attack, special defense, and speed, which is a bit more fitting with its body frame. At the end of the day, I just wouldn't mess with either of them though, because they are pretty scary demons and they do work together. Mess with the snow runs and you're not going to even be fortunate enough to see the afterlife. But before I continue on to our next entry, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this so far, I guarantee you'll enjoy the rest of this deep dive and many other videos on this channel, so make sure you subscribe. I also want to thank members of the channel. Their extra support ensures I can take the time to thoroughly research Pokemon and their real-world science and myths and bring quality content to everyone every week. If you'd like behind-the-scenes info, early access to videos, and members-exclusive content like this list that includes, I pointed the wrong way, that way. This list that includes Pokemon that canonically hate you, then become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a massive difference. As we go along, let me know your favorite gender-exclusive Pokemon. We have a bit before we get to some of mine, but I'll let you know when we get there, I guarantee. I also love reading your comments, plus they appease the almighty algorithm alongside likes, shares, and hyping the video, so make sure you do those things. If you don't meet the quota, I will be suplexed by an Ursaring, and unfortunately that will not be on camera, so it's not more entertainment. But enough of all that, thank you again for watching, and on with the video. Volbeat and Illumise are strictly male and female in that order. Their differences really lie upon them just being fireflies. Illumise attracts a swarm of Volbeat using a sweet fragrance. Once the Volbeat have gathered, this Pokemon leads the lit-up swarm in drawing geometric designs on the canvas of the night sky. Meanwhile, with the arrival of night, Volbeat emits light from its tail. It communicates with others by adjusting the intensity and flashing of its light. Their base stats are about the same, with the exception of Illumise being a special attacker, while Volbeat is a physical attacker. But is this how fireflies in the real world work? Well, as it turns out, as with many creatures, there are pheromones that do help with the mating process and identifying a good mate. Otherwise, it really is up to the male fireflies to put on a big show to woo the ladies. The timing, brightness, and pattern of their light all play into this. The specific pattern may even tell you exactly what species they are. Some are just a flash, some arc their movements while shining their light, and so many other combinations. And I never thought I'd actually say this, but I think I just gained a deeper love and appreciation for these greaser 70s fireflies. All because I can now imagine their little dances a lot easier in my head and how complicated they could just get just because they are Pokemon. Dips and dives, little flashes, everything to light up the skies in their favor. Who, of course, would I then be to call myself a man of science and ecology if I didn't talk about the elephant in the room, the loss of fireflies. So let's take a bit of a tangent to talk about that. There are some species facing the serious risk of extinction, and considering pesticides harming them, light pollution overall messing with these mating rituals, and more, all then resulting on populations taking a high dive. And of course, some news might say that, oh, some populations will be just fine, but they'll only be fine for another generation or two, or become endemic to a specific location. Then, eventually, that location will be put at risk without the proper care, putting the last of the fireflies at risk of extinction. But it's not all bad. There are ways to help if you have fireflies, or really most insects or arthropods or arachnids around you. Leave some dedicated sections of leaf litter or hiding spots for them. If you have pets, you can always get specific sprays, or plants rather, that deter things like mosquitoes or ticks if you're afraid of that with these spots. But even I have a few areas where I just let leaf litter exist in thin layers and a large wood block that just kind of came with the house that I live in, and things like worms and wood lice love to make their little home there. But back to our Pokemon, on the plus side, to close them out, at least they shouldn't have any problems with their populations in their world. While we're on the topic, let's talk about our Pokemon that are the same species and not only have strong visual sexual dimorphism, but exhibit vastly different habits or abilities. There are tons of visual differences between male and female Pokemon, Pikachu having a flat or heart-shaped tail, Wobbuffet having lipstick, so on and so forth. And I could have talked about all of those, but that felt boring. Like, incredibly boring, because there's not an incredible tie to every single gender difference. But in the case of Meowstic, there's a very clear difference, as not only are their colors swapped, but their personalities are boiled down to two words: offensive and defensive. Male Meowstic has a strong defensive instinct, as it prefers to support its allies rather than attack, despite being strong enough to blast away any opponent. It is willing to use its full power to protect itself or its partners. When a male Meowstic continues to emit its powerful psychic energy, it will damage its body as a side effect. Meanwhile, female Meowstic is known to be a bit more selfish, aggressive, and aversive than its male counterpart. Should it not get what it wants, it will torment anyone with its psychic abilities. It generally has a stoic expression even when using its powers, and its unfriendliness is part of its charm, as you would expect of a cat. When it senses danger, it will unleash its psychic power at its maximum strength with no regard for its opponent. Why waste time building up to your final attack, just use your max power right off the bat. Now, their base stat totals are the same, which explains why males are able to unleash the same power as females, but it's just not in their nature to do so, meaning they aren't traditionally trained to do it. If you had a male Meowstic from birth, it'd likely not have any issue with emitting powerful offensive psychic powers if trained properly based on this information. The problem is that they are still naturally inclined to be defensive, because the move pools of male and female Meowstic are different. For example, males close with Imprison, Quick Guard, Psychic, and Misty Terrain. It's as if they're protecting something and only attacking as one of their last measurements, and that Psychic Terrain prevents any Pokemon on the ground from being hit by our fastest moves, like Quick Attack, anything with priority really. Meanwhile, the last 4 moves of females are Extrasensory, Shadow Ball, Psychic, and Future Sight. All very offensive abilities, and the last attack a guaranteed hit that will even work after she gets knocked out. These adaptations are perfectly tailored to not only protect each other, but to even protect their kittens if Meowstic had any wide-eyed Esper lying around. This does kind of go against what we typically see in the real world, by the way. Male cats are often considered aggressive, even to their own young, but that doesn't mean they always are, so don't get it twisted. Usually, if they are in a safe environment or have been neutered or any combination of a number of other factors in the wild or domestic environments that allow them to be more social, basically they just have to be raised to have a social and nurturing behavior, and then they'll exhibit it. So while I don't think female Meowstic take this less parental role to be the opposite of the real world, their more aggressive traits likely take inspiration from it instead, making it so that way, little Esper has 2 very present, very kind, very caring and protective parents. Now, I would talk more about them and their mega form, but I actually have an entire video dedicated to that already, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. Indeedee differs more drastically by gender than Meowstic, with male and female Indeedee having slightly different base stats as well as learn sets. Males have higher attack, special attack, and speed, while females have higher defense, special defense, and HP. While male Indeedee can learn the TM and TR moves Light Screen, Reflect, Safeguard, Guard Swap, and Baton Pass, females can learn Power Swap, Trick Room, Magic Room, Wonder Room, Tri Attack, and Encore. The egg move Extrasensory is exclusive to male Indeedee, while the egg moves Psycho Shift and Heal Pulse are exclusive to female Indeedee. So, why do they have these moves? Well, as it turns out, male and female Indeedee have identical traits from beginning to end until it comes to 2 specific skills. Males are skilled at being valets, while the females are supposed to be excellent babysitters. Otherwise, they gain energy from the gratitude of others as they aid them, they use their psychic powers to predict their trainer's actions to better serve them, and they pass information to each other by tapping horns, which seems really, really cute. It actually makes me realize that this trait of only gaining energy from those that actually express gratitude for the efforts that Indeedee put in ensures that these Indeedee aren't basically being treated like slaves or indentured servants in any capacity. It's a very small detail, but it's beautiful actually. They're noted to also dislike conflict and will throw things at anyone who disturbs its territory using their psychic powers. So now I can only imagine like Alfred as one of these Indeedee whooping some major butts, which as a side, I'm pretty sure there's a number of different comics or shows where Alfred really does just beat the tar out of Batman. Nevertheless, their moves play into each other and their roles to support each other, other Pokemon, and their trainers overall. But I've hardly talked about them in previous videos, so let's look at what they're even inspired by, because we have the phrase yes indeed for English and Indeedee, and then the Japanese name is Yes-san, literally for yes sir, and the honorific san, or even yes and. The hard part from here is narrowing down the supernatural creature they'd be inspired by, but it really might primarily boil down to satyrs at the end of the day, really butlery satyrs. Well, that and brownies, but not the ones that you eat. Brownies are household spirits from Scottish folklore, known for performing chores at night in exchange for small offerings. They are mischievous, yet helpful, maintaining the home by assisting with domestic and farming tasks. When insulted or offered unwanted gifts, such as clothing, they are said to leave the household forever. Why are they given clothing? They usually wear tattered clothing or very modest clothing, if any clothes at all. So, you know, it's kind of an insult to try and give them clothes. Considering they were first released in Galar, this lines up pretty well all in all for Indeedee, and instead of having the typical scrungly looking brownie, you have these guys. For Basculegion males, not only have a red coloration for the spirits of Basculegion attached to them, but they're also more physically inclined, while females have whitish blue spirits and are specially inclined. It states that female Basculegion can afflict a target with terrifying illusions that are under its control. The deeper the sadness in its friends' souls, the paler Basculegion becomes. Meanwhile, male Basculegion can jump with incredible power. Parts of its body are tinged red by the rage of its fallen friends. Incredible, jumping, terrifying illusions. I think I'll take the illusions if I had to choose between these two. It just sounds way cooler. Though their colors are actually realistic in a way, because these guys specifically take after salmon. Delicious, delicious salmon. As a Hispanic, I can't let that go by me, even though Basculegion takes after a very aggressive bass. So, you know, two big fish types for food. Chinook salmon in the real world have about a 5% chance of carrying a recessive genetic trait that prevents them from metabolizing the pink-red pigments in their food, which of course would give them the red coloration normally. This results in pure ivory-colored flesh that, according to chefs, is exceptionally rich, mild, and buttery. I also have to add in that in their primary art, we see that male Basculegion not only look angry, but they have a mustache much larger than the females. To me, it kind of looks like Komodo if he was a fish, and I'm sure that's 100% intentional, considering the times and the facial hairstyles that would exist during the times of Hisui, the Edo period, and the Meiji Restoration period. Meanwhile, female Basculegion do look sadder overall, and wearing lipstick, it seems like, instead of a mustache. Although, is it just me, or are you also seeing like the Joker smile going on here as well? Are female Basculegion just going to start quoting Joker's backstory to me if I try to catch them? Really, nothing left to say here. It's really nice and simple as far as the connections go overall, though I still need to really reach out to some trusted professionals to get some better insight on Ainu culture, because each of the Hisuian variants have some suspected strong connections to said Ainu culture, and I don't want to misspread information. Up next, we have yet another easy connection with Oinkologne. The male Oinkologne has access to the ability Lingering Aroma, while the female has access to Aroma Veil. Male Oinkologne have high attack and defense, while females have higher HP and special defense. Aggressive males and very defensive females that are able to protect their young, got it. It genuinely seems to just write itself with the stereotypes, which again, there's nothing wrong with these stereotypes because it's just kind of nature. Yet, we have to question this aroma ability that exists between them. There are a lot of animals that will spray, claw, scrape, and pretty much do anything else to release smells into the area in order to attract a mate or mark their territory. In the case of the real world, male pigs, known as boars, attract females, known as sows or gilts, primarily through chemical, auditory, and physical courtship rituals. They release distinct pheromones in their saliva and urine to induce heat in females and court them by producing rhythmic grunting sounds, grinding their teeth to create foamy saliva, and nuzzling the female's body. From what I could find, if you have pigs, you should also be aware of what's going on around them when the foaming happens, because they'll do that at anticipation of food, stress, overeating, or really any other health issues as well. I too relate to a pig in this way. Put food in front of me and tell me to wait and I'm going to flood the room. But in all seriousness, despite protecting itself from attacks that limit move choices, female Oinkologne's aroma veil can be changed by the power of lingering aroma, which I actually love this, because with aroma veil, it states the Pokemon and its allies cannot game the infatuated, taunted, unable to repeat, move disabled, heal prevented, or encore statuses, meaning any females with this ability will not be distracted or infatuated by anyone other than male Oinkologne or somebody who has been quote-unquote infected with their lingering aroma, leading them on the breadcrumb trail back to an Oinkologne that they will likely enjoy mating with. It's abilities like this that make me question how Pokemon adapted to gain this ability. I've had a long-standing idea and even had many of you ask me to cover why Pokemon have evolved to have certain traits, and I piecemeal it here and there since that's a really hard video to cater to YouTube general audiences as far as initial titling or anything else goes, but we'll see what I can do one of these days and we can move on to a legendary duo. I definitely feel like Latios and Latias have been sneaking their way into every single video lately. Twin, legendary, psychic dragons, strangely tied to dreams, and a tragic story where one of them turns into an orb for seemingly the rest of their lives unless they eventually return to normal, kind of fits a lot of categories. Despite everything in the Pokédex though, they do share all of the same powers overall, Latias being more overall defensive, while Latios is overall offensive. And I do love that when they Mega Evolve, they both turn purple to represent the mixing of red and blue, their primary colors. Although, they are some of the only legendary Pokemon introduced early on in the franchise that still have their signature moves belonging only to them, Mist Ball and Luster Purge, which Mist Ball isn't even mist. It's a flurry of downy feathers that does damage and might lower special attack stats of the target. Meanwhile, Luster Purge does the same thing, except it might lower special defense of the target, meaning getting hit by both of these special moves makes it a lot harder to take out Latios and Latias since they fly around a lot, also keeping a distance away from your physical attacks. I can also only imagine their duo attack in Smash Ultimate where they are zipping all over the screen at high speeds while crying out, and it's a chore to just dodge them in the first place. Mind you, in their Mega forms, they can reach Mach 4, meaning they are moving 4 times faster than the speed of sound. That would be about 3,069 miles per hour or 4,939 kilometers per hour. So, probably not legal in a school zone. Also, if you were surprised by these Pokemon having feathers, it is described as being a glass-like down, which is also what helps them turn invisible or change their appearance as they refract light. Now, there are tons of inspirations, different ones that go into these Pokemon, but as for birds we could look at, the mythical Martlet is one of them, or even the common Swift as a actual real-life bird, which, with the Swift, it holds the record for powered horizontal flight at 69 miles per hour or 111 kilometers an hour. Although there are other birds like falcons that dive at faster speeds, between the general shape of the feathers and this high speed, it's easy to see this tie for Latios and Latias' inspiration. Unfortunately, even their rarity translates from the real world. According to the Wildlife Aid Foundation, the common swift is listed as red, the highest conservation priority and requiring urgent action. Their decline is reportedly due to the increasing pressures on nest and food availability, a direct result of changes in infrastructure and farming practices. With preference for nesting in small gaps of houses and churches, the increase in property renovations and removal of soft-fit gaps has reduced the number of nesting sites available for the species. Now, there are always ways to help, such as flowers to supply the invertebrates that they eat, incorporate swift breaks into new properties, or even making nest boxes. Although nest boxes do get weird, I will say, primarily if they're in places where wild cats might frequent, because then they become easy targets because it's like a buffet or a place where the birds constantly go back to, but nests are kind of the same anyway. It's just that it's one common place all the time that any bird could go to, so put those up with good consideration. Lastly though, just like Latios and Latias, who stay in the air constantly, common swifts will eat, sleep, and drink while flying, only landing to breed with others of their kind, which I'm honestly just surprised I've never found this connection until now, but I hope you find that as cool as I do. So, when you think about the most forgettable Pokemon, who do you think of? Do you think of Sawk and Throh? Do you think of Pokemon you hardly see like Cherubi? Or do you think of Mothim and Wormadam? I genuinely believe Mothim might be the most forgettable Pokemon of them all. And it's because we have so many moths and butterflies already, plus Burmy is only found in trees, so unless you're shaking every branch you come across, you probably aren't getting a Burmy, and that's assuming it drops and not any other Pokemon hiding away like a Munchlax who then breaks your spine on impact. But once you do get a Burmy, you have a 50-50 shot of it being male or female, with males turning into Mothim and females turning into Wormadam. Now, Burmy in specific is a bagworm, worms that make a big ol' bag-like nest on trees and will eat away at those trees to a ridiculous degree. I've killed some pretty big nests before to protect some of the trees they were infesting because they were pretty bad overall. Editing Acrylic here, turns out that I never actually dealt with bagworms. I only dealt with webworms, which make really nasty big nests anyway. I will say that was back when I was working in a state forest, so I was doing this professionally, and for note, the recommended way to get rid of them was to burn them in a fire, which sounds a little cruel, but there are some things that just need to burn, simple as that. But just like Mothim, only male bagworms actually pupate and come back out as fuzzy blackish gray moths with mostly transparent wings. In contrast, adult female bagworms never develop wings. They remain permanently inside their silken bags as legless, grub-like insects awaiting mating, thus explaining the larger body they gain as Burmy evolves into Wormadam. From here, though, the males just use their antennae to track the scent of females, emerging from their bags in late summer or early fall, fly to the bags containing females to mate with, mate, and then die. Meanwhile, females will lay 500 to 1,000 eggs inside their massive bag before dying themselves. Again, eat, spawn, die, sure, right there, right on the acrylic closet Teespring. It is one of my most plugged pieces because damn do I love it. Of course then, we do have to ask, how do Mothim and Wormadam reflect this? Well, Mothim is a nomadic nocturnal Pokemon that always remains on the move, searching for flower, honey, or nectar. It has often been seen traveling in fields and mountains. Despite its diet, it is never seen near any flower gardens. This is because instead of gathering honey on its own, it rather raids the hives of combee for honey. Meanwhile, unlike Burmy, Wormadam's cloak is a part of its body, with the fusion being suspected to have been caused by the energy generated by its evolution. Its cloak acts similar to fur and skin and never sheds. Sandy Cloak Wormadam's cloak is an effective defense capable of repelling a Starly's pecking with ease, whereas Trash Cloak Wormadam uses its cloak as camouflage as it helps it hide from predators. Pretty clear how all the different ideas of the bagworm were used to make these Pokemon, how these adaptations were brought into existence in order to help them reproduce more in the future, and it's all just really neat when we get the real-world extreme sexual dimorphisms like this represented really well. Alright, this has to bother someone else, but spell Vespiquen in your head for me. If you spelled it with 2 E's at the very end, Vespiquen, you're wrong. It's spelled with only 1 E at the end, as if to say Vespiquen, which is not how it's said in the anime or anywhere else, but I digress, it's just something that bothers me. Of course, only female combee, though, can become a Vespiquen. By comparison, queen bees are not born, they are created. When the hive needs a new queen due to an old queen's departure, decline, or death, worker bees select a young female larva and feed it an exclusive nutrient-rich diet of royal jelly inside of a specially built peanut-shaped shell. What is royal jelly composed of, you ask? Well, it is a nutrient-rich, milky secretion produced by young nurse worker bees. It is made by metabolizing digested honey and pollen and secreting the substance from their hypopharyngeal, we'll go with that take, and mandibular glands. It consists mostly of water, proteins, sugars, and unique fatty acids. It basically activates the reproductive system as part of all of this. Although opposite to male combees, which seem to do plenty of work, real bees do nothing, or at least rather real male bees do nothing. They are effectively useless outside of mating with the queen, while the female bees are the ones doing all the work. Males do not forage, they do not clean, they do not defend the hive. In fact, they cannot even feed themselves and must be looked after by the female worker bees. That is horribly, horribly pathetic. I've read books on bees and somehow I have forgotten, or I have just never read that little bit of a pathetic fact, and that is even more pathetic than I have ever thought. Once again, though, male combee act completely differently. Combee are otherwise similar to bees in their social behavior. They are mostly sociable among their own kind and form groups of about 100 individuals. They are generally harmless to others as they tend to flee when threatened. From sunrise to sunset, combee will collect nectar to create honey wherever they can. It is also noted Beautifly often provides trouble by driving away any combee that tries to collect nectar near it because they're very defensive about the flowers that they enjoy. Though combee produce honey for multiple purposes, they actually usually consume it, which real bees don't really do, as you would expect. Each swarm of combee makes a different flavor of honey. When not gathering nectar, combee will protect their queen, Vespiquen. They are very suggestible and will never defy the orders of their queen. When a Vespiquen does feel threatened, its combee army will not think twice about risking their lives to protect their queen, to the point of aggressively attacking or even killing the threat. Again, very much like the real world. Combee commonly live in caves and hollow trees of forests and other natural secluded areas with their queen. They sleep by creating a hive with other combee, locking together into a tessellated wall to feel safe in larger numbers. At least until a ribbon bee makes their way in as a brood parasite and eats a combee or two, which is only ever shown in one moment. Not that it shows it eating them, but it does show there's an empty little socket right next to the ribbon bee within the animated series, and that was a really recent development. Meanwhile, Vespiquen use their pheromones to guide their combee and will defend her brood with her life, going as far as even eating those that dare enter her hive, which is part of her body, so I don't imagine that ribbon bee will be okay forever. This also reminds me of vulture bees who make honey out of meat. They collect rotting flesh from animal carcasses, break it down using specialized gut bacteria and enzymes, and regurgitate it to produce a nutrient-rich, protein-heavy substance that tastes more like meat than traditional honey. They are the only non-vegetarian bees, which is a wild sentence to say. It's thought, though, that this novel behavior came about due to intense competition for nectar from other bees. Stingless bees usually have baskets on their hind legs that they use to collect pollen. The vulture bees were observed using these same structures to collect small bits of meat. They then turn the digested meat into honey, storing it in special chambers that are sealed off for weeks before they can access it. I'm also personally willing to bet then that Vespiquen does the same exact thing when it does kill another Pokemon or person trying to enter their hive, and is likely omnivorous. So, keep that in mind next time you see this 3'11" or 1.2 meter tall Pokemon. Because male Salandit give all of their good food to female Salandit, they actually suffer from constant malnutrition, thus resulting in them being completely unable to evolve, while the females are able to evolve into Salazzle. The sheer amount of food necessary to avoid malnutrition must be high too, because you only have a 12.5% chance of running into a female Salandit in the first place, which this has to be deeply seated into their genetics, because even if you take in a male Salandit, you'd expect to be able to resolve their malnutrition problem, but apparently you can't, and they still aren't able to evolve. So it has to be genetic related, more so than it is just malnutrition. Actually, you know what? Give me a Salandit population that has very low populations of females and no Salazzle except in very special designated areas within a greater area or within an entire region, making it so that the males actually have the ability to eat their fills of food and evolve too. And throw that right into Gen 10 for me, please. Perfect little tropical place for them to exist, just like Alola. Now, they're mostly inspired by the Japanese fire-bellied newt. According to Kaudata culture, courting males actively pursue females and compete for their attention by ramming them, blocking their path, and fanning their tail in the direction of the female. Tail fanning is a method of wafting pheromones towards the female, and a female can lay up to 200 eggs in a breeding season. So this whole pheromone situation seems to be reflected and actually switched from the male being aggressive and wafting these major pheromones to then belonging to the female instead. When possible, these eggs are folded between the leaves of aquatic plants, and they hatch approximately 20 days after being laid, depending on temperature, and the larva usually metamorphose about 3 to 5 months later. Weird that larva was used in that context. Now, there's even a Kanto race of these creatures living on islands of Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. They inhabit ponds, ditches, slow stream pools, small lakes, and pretty much any body of still clear water it can find. How convenient then that these Pokemon appear here in Alola for the first time, but for whatever reason, when we look at the Let's Go games, they weren't added into Kanto during those remakes at all. Then again, I think that game just wanted to stick to the original 150, 151, so I guess that's irrelevant or a moot point. Although, just as we see a size difference between males and females in Salandit and Salazzle, Japanese fire-bellied newts exhibit sexual dimorphism, with females generally being larger, 10 to 15 centimeters, and rounder bodied. Males are smaller, 8 to 10 centimeters, have shorter, flatter bodies, and develop prominent, swollen cloacas during their breeding season. I didn't need to read that. And now you got to hear it too. I don't know why. Cloaca is just it's just a dirty word. Males, though, feature higher tail fins and may display a bluish-purple nuptial sheen. As another note, it's really fun that their name is Yatsumori from Yato, burglar, and Imori, newt. While Salandit does have a little tie around the back of their neck, as if they are wearing a little mask that they're going to go ahead and rob a bank with. As for those mentioned pheromones, though, it looks like they're released from the center of the back from little holes, though those aren't just for pheromones, that's definitely for the toxic fumes that they release as well. The same goes for Salazzle as well, though, because it's through their pheromones that they're able to control Salandit and force them to give all their food to Salazzle. They'll even fight other Salazzle to absorb their Salandit into their own harem, so out there somewhere is probably just one absolutely schmassive Queen Salazzle roided out on all the high protein food that these Salandit have given. I do find it interesting that they do live in caves while having a darker body, allowing them to blend in and sneak up on their prey before they release flames and probably scare the lights out of the prey, giving them a heart attack, shocking them, whatever it is, so that way they're just too scared to move and then are immediately attacked. Though to close on this one, as if to make things worse, she's given Fire Lash upon level up to really keep her Salandit in line in the exact ways that you would expect. Now we're on to the Pokemon whose entire species are purely male or female. There are no counterparts within their species. I know there are some we'll be talking about later that seem as though they are the same species, but the Pokedex is noted to separate every Pokemon by species, and that's why they get a different dex number even upon evolution. First up, though, is the Tyrogue line, including Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, and Hitmontop. They are exclusively male, and even though they are rare, they can be found in the wild. You might wonder how they're even able to reproduce within their species, but they do belong to the humanoid egg group when they're evolved. Not that that actually means anything, because there's no female. But to at least explain the whole egg group thing, many different Pokemon still belong to egg groups, which allow them to still reproduce, but theoretically, any male-only species would need a Ditto to breed with, which may explain why these Pokemon are so rare, amongst many others. You might even suspect that many of these all-male species, especially ones inspired by martial arts, may be long-lived creatures. Pretty easy to explain overall though. Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan here, as the first of this quartet, are named after real-life male legends in the martial arts, setting the tone for the rest of the Pokemon here, as all of them were male. I also did just recently talk about them in my video on every single counterpart, but I had left out Hitmontop and Tyrogue, so I'll talk about them here instead, which they aren't even all that crazy. In Japanese, Tyrogue is called Bulky from Bulky, Battle, and Rookie. Meanwhile, Hitmontop is Capoeira, directly pulled from Capoeira as a fighting style. And I will always mention that Capoeira was used by freedom fighters in Brazil, which is amazing and even ties to Quaquaval, but that is a story for another day, and we could quickly close out this entry. The Chansey line follow the old stereotype that all nurses are women, but also a number of other ideas, which Chansey is more than just a nurse, but also a general caregiver, and I would even argue that she would be a midwife, considering we always find them in the wild near baby Pokemon, and they care deeply for young Pokemon the most, it seems. This does extend to beyond grown Pokemon as well, because in Pokemon Legends Arceus, if the player is injured, any nearby Chansey will come to check them out, and then flee when they are fully healed. Now, these Chansey aren't actually healing the player, but they're at least checking in on you, rather than trying to put you in the ground like everything else. Ultimately, they're just tied to motherhood, and the idea of being very nurturing being tied to women, which goes further to likely draw from the Japanese folklore concept of fukusuke. Historically originating in the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, the Fukusuke doll was often placed at the entrances of businesses, tea houses, and entertainment venues, which apparently included brothels. Store owners and merchants enshrined them to attract customers, wealth, and positive energy, which, what does all of that then tie to? The oval and lucky eggs that these Pokemon hold, the many eggs they give out, and their overall connection to luck and health. Though you could argue that there should be a male version out there somewhere, since the Fukusuke doll is depicted as a man, but again, that's just another idea that Pokemon likely twisted, so that way instead of it being all male, it was all female instead, so I doubt we'll actually see that happen. A very easy comparison is Tauros and Miltank, because they're literally just bulls and cows. They both play heavily into their real-world stereotypes as well, with Tauros being incredibly aggressive and constantly actively charging at others and not stopping until they hit something, all to the point where it is the only Pokemon capable of learning the move Raging Bull. Meanwhile, Miltank, the milk that it produces, is sweet and very nutritious, and can be used to heal Pokemon and ill or weary humans. Drinking a large amount of its milk will cause the Pokemon or person to gain weight and develop stomach pains. While Miltank can produce over 5 gallons of milk a day, it turns out that the real-world cow can on average produce 7.5 gallons a day, and it all depends on the health overall because they can develop more, which I'm genuinely surprised. There are very few Pokemon that are outclassed by real-life animals, and now it's actually got me wondering what other animals are out there that are able to completely outclass regular Pokemon in these finer details. Kangaskhan are an all-female species belonging to the Monster 8 group, but despite this detail, there are multiple dex entries that imply there might be a male version out there somewhere. As the dex entries state, the female raises its young in its belly pouch for around 3 years, which always makes me wonder if the baby in the pouch might actually be a male, since it does have a couple of different physical characteristics. But let me take you on a wild ride through the real world and Kangaskhan and how they made it the way that it is, as I was working through my research on this, because I looked up if there are more male or female kangaroos, and apparently their birthing rates are the same, but there may be less males in a number of groups because of environmental factors like food scarcity or the males just, boxing the ever-loving piss out of each other. But as I scrolled down for more sources to double-check my sources, so on and so forth, I saw frequently asked questions. One of them being, do kangaroos have 3 vaginas? And this led to the most metal birth in existence. And don't worry, I'm not going to say or show anything graphic, but this is dope. The first part's just interesting biology to at least start out with. But the 2 outer side vaginas are used for sperm to travel up to the animal's 2 separate uteruses. The middle vagina is specifically used for giving birth. This unique anatomy allows a mother kangaroo to be continuously pregnant. The real metal part is this though. Kangaroos give birth with surprising physical ease because the baby is born at a highly underdeveloped stage. However, survival requires a difficult instinctive climb for the newborn. After a brief 28 to 33 day gestation period, pregnancy period, the jelly bean-sized embryo emerges and must crawl unaided through its mother's fur like a rock climber to the safety of her pouch. First off, giving birth in a month is wild, and being constantly pregnant is another wild, and having 2 uteruses is a third wild. But then, fourthly, your first act as a living creature involves rock climbing your own mother for survival. Meanwhile, male bees are useless even as an adult. And I'll say it now, this was the moment when I realized I needed to draw Kangaskhan as part of the thumbnail, because this just explains why they always have a baby in their pouch. Though instead of going pink, as you would see with a newborn Joey, they decided blue would be less graphic, which, yeah, good idea. Throh and Sawk are more pure male martial artists, once again likely because they are in what are traditionally male-dominated sports. Not much else to say here that I said with the Tyrogue Line, honestly. But again, I did talk about them in my counterparts video if you want to know more. Smoochum and Jynx are up next, the queen of the ice and her child, and Bulbapedia puts it pretty nicely as to why they are purely female. Jynx's first documented design can be seen in Satoshi Tajiri, the man who created Pokemon, a biographical manga about Satoshi Tajiri, dating Jynx's design to around 1992 to 1993. Game Freak's headquarters was in close proximity to Shibuya 109, which was a common gathering place for Gyaru street fashion in the 1980s and 1990s. Gyaru, or Gal, being a subculture of primarily women who wear fake tan and bleached hair, is likely inspiration for Jynx's design. This is played upon further with Smoochum referencing the trend of Gyaru mamas raising their children in their image. While the culture behind it might be different, it does kind of make me think of beauty pageant moms and child beauty pageants, which, yeah, you know what, you do you as an adult, but like, child beauty pageants weird me out. In fact, they kind of gross me out. no, not kinda, they do gross me out, considering the statistics behind them and the people who are actively very creepily interested in them, and then the level of abuse that often ends up happening as a part of that. But off of that topic, there is the chance that Jynx is also based on Hel, goddess of the underworld, or even Brunhilde, due to the clothing she has and her singing capabilities. Brunhilde being the classic rendition of the opera singer often nicknamed the Fat Lady from the Ring des Nibelungen. Nibelungen? Someone correct me in the comments and tell me how to say that. I should have looked it up. I should have done my due diligence, but I didn't. Though one connection that is suspected within the community is that of the Yamauba. From yokai.com again, we have Yamauba are the old hags and witches of the Japanese mountains and forests. They were once human, but became corrupted and transformed into monsters. Some sport horns or fangs, but most often Yamauba look just like ordinary, kind old ladies with no sign of their evil nature until they attack. Yamauba live alone in huts by the road, where they occasionally offer weary travelers shelter, food, and a place to sleep. Late at night, when their guests are fast asleep, Yamauba transform into their true shape, an ugly, old, demonic witch. Thus revealed, they try to catch and eat their guests, often using powerful magic. Stories of encounters with Yamauba have been spread by those few travelers lucky enough to escape. These tales were then passed along for generations until they came to be told as bedtime stories to disobedient children. Be good, or the Yamauba will come to get you. Sometimes, Yamauba are created when young women accused of crimes or wicked deeds flee into the wilderness and live in exile. The women transform gradually over many years into mountain witches. In some cases, their origin can be explained by an old custom from times of famine or economic hardship. When it becomes impossible to feed everyone, families had to make a hard choice. Remove one member so that the rest can survive. Often, the sacrifice chosen was the newly born or the elderly. Some families led their mothers deep into the woods and left them there to die. These abandoned old women, either out of rage or desperation, transformed into horrible monsters that fed on humans and practiced black magic. There are a few looser connections there overall, but between living in cold and mountainous regions, using magic that we can see Jynx perform to release an Aurorus, summon Suicune, and more, alongside some psychic Pokemon like Kadabra being associated with black magic, we can then see some more possible ties for Jynx here. Braviary, another one I recently talked about alongside Mandibuzz, who we'll get to after our bald eagle here. All male species. Braviary has the red, white, and blue of the American flag on it, but with some yellow added in there while we're at it. Sure, it fits all the ideas of what America was often depicted as, extremely aggressive, but for noble reasons, known for bravery and pride, and a Pokemon that will fight fiercely to help and protect its friends. Even if it's injured or has its life threatened, it will still fight. The more scars it has on its front, the more respect it gets from its peers. Scars on its back will bring ridicule, however. It has earned the nickname the Hero of the Skies due to its extreme dedication for its friends, and aiding its valiance, Braviary is extremely strong, capable of lifting a car and still flying with it. However, due to its hot-headed and belligerent nature, it was rejected from being the flying taxi carrier in Galar in favor of Corviknight. Its psychic Hisuian form is a bit different though, bearing the blood-curdling cry that bald eagles are depicted to have, but don't actually have in the real world. That's right folks, the cry of a bald eagle is not nearly as impressive, I'll play that here. Instead, the cry of a red-tailed hawk here is often used instead in movies. With that new lore out of the way, there's speculation that because it not only represents America, but also Native Americans, Braviary seemingly does have its feathers in the design of a Native American war bonnet, something that would only be traditionally worn by male leaders of the American Plains Indians nations, which might explain the 100% male species. This is really the only tie that can be found, but if there were a female Braviary in the real world, then by comparison it would be about 25 to 30% heavier, with lower leg bones being 20% longer, as we do see in the real world. So, beefier America bird if it ever did exist. Its counterpart Mandibuzz is a 100% female species, bearing resemblance to a number of vultures like the lappet-faced vulture, the white-rumped vulture, and with its heavy association with bones, one of my top favorite birds of all time, the bearded vulture. I mean, look at how cool that thing looks. However, the saturated coloration of its shiny, more closely resembles a turkey vulture, which is a New World vulture. This is really a play into classic westerns and depictions of wide open desert environments, places people would travel over to make a new home for themselves in the past. Places where these vultures were often depicted to wait for their next feeble target to feed from, just like how Mandibuzz actively feeds on weak prey such as Cubone. Its Japanese name is Volgina, likely from vulture and regina or queen. In fact, many of the names given to this Pokemon throughout the different languages have a more feminine quality to them, but is there any reason for that? Outside of making it a counterpart to Braviary as a female-only exclusive species to certain games, probably not. Although it is noted to be incredibly difficult to tell the difference between male and female turkey vultures, so take that. Surprisingly, Cresselia is a female-only species, whereas many legendary and mythical Pokemon are not given a gender, are non-binary, or a number of other factors. This is not the case for Cresselia. Actually, as a note, Pokemon has always made an interesting note to often say it instead of he or she when talking about Pokemon most of the time when they aren't saying the Pokemon's name directly. Just a strange detail I picked up on while looking through all of this information. Even stranger though is that Darkrai does not have a gender despite being Cresselia's counterpart. And even in the Pokédex of Hisui, we are told by Professor Laventon, Cresselia is reminiscent of the crescent moon. It leaves a brilliant line of light in its wake as it flies across the night sky. I dare say it resembles the heavenly maiden who created the Milky Way. This then opens the door to a number of different deities accredited with creating the Milky Way or being related to space overall. We have the Qiannu. Traditionally, Qian refers to entities who have attained immortality and supernatural or magical abilities later in life, with a connection to the heavenly realms inaccessible to mortals. This is often achieved through spiritual self-cultivation, alchemy, or worship by others. This is different from the gods or deities in Chinese mythology and Taoism. But this is actually incredibly fitting because not only should the Taoism aspect remind you of Reshiram and Zekrom, who I have often tied to Cresselia and Darkrai in other videos, but also because Shinto belief is strongly shown through Pokemon, especially in Hisui, and Shinto is believed to draw over half of its practices and rituals from Taoist influences. And considering Cresselia does pray to something within Pokemon sleep, it would make sense that she would be noted as a minor deity, or better fitting in title, a kami within the greater pantheon, at least within Pokemon. Now don't mistake this as being the only inspiration, because we can look into Celine, Chang'e, Lindu, all commonly depicted as feminine deities related to the moon. And of course, we can easily just say that the moon is often associated with femininity, much like what we see with Lunala in Alola, even though Lunala doesn't have a gender either. There are a number of flower or fruit inspired Pokemon that we'll be talking about soon that are all female only species. Lilligant, Florges, and Tsareena's entire lines are strictly females only. It does make you look over at other Pokemon such as Blossom and Cherim, wondering why they aren't female only, and that's because of the special way that plants go about their existence. You see, plants aren't all hermaphroditic. They can just grow a second body from their own and have a female and male body simultaneously separated from each other but still be the same plant. This is important for pollination, and even making sure that predators don't eat parts of them that they don't want to have eaten. For example, fruits want to be eaten by certain animals, so that way the seeds are pooped out through a greater area, allowing plants to grow in what they hope will be new, better places long term. But even if this isn't the case, there are plenty of animals that will just browse on plants without a care, and by having this other attached body, they can still continue their species without worry. In the case of allium plants, or garlic, onion, so on and so forth, they are hermaphrodites, containing both male and female parts in their blooms. The Allium victorialis that Hisuian Lilligant represents would be hermaphroditic. Same would go for lilies within the same blossom for modern day Lilligant, meaning it could have been male or female, though flowers are often associated with femininity for many reasons, so the designers decided to make it female. This would though then explain why, at least in their Pokédex, they are said to look for mates, even though there are no strictly male specimens of their kind. Though an important detail is that nearly every single grass-type Pokemon is also in the Plant A group, meaning they can all cross-pollinate with each other, even in lore. Along the same lines, we have the Florges line, which are deeply associated with flowers while being fairies, especially as we look at Flabebe, who has a wreath of flowers worn like a crown upon her head. So, as we open up our book of fables, we find ourselves looking at Greek deities, Antheia and Colores. Antheia literally means flower goddess, while Colores was actually a minor nymph associated with spring, flowers, and new growth, believed to have dwelt in the Elysian fields. She would be the equivalent of the Roman goddess Flora, it is said, a goddess of course who presided over fertility and vegetation. So once again, due to connections to fables, myth, and deities, we have a strictly female line. As for Tsareena, it is very directly inspired by the mangosteen. I mean, look at this fruit and Bounsweet to begin with, and you'll immediately see the copied homework from real life. It even has the big puffy white parts that Tsarena's massive thighs are designed after, and you thought I'd waltz around saying it. No, I'm past that. We can't ignore those things, and the fact that Google thinks regular Tsareena needs to be censored on Google Images. But these Pokemon being strictly female is because cultivated mangosteen trees are strictly female. They reproduce completely without males or pollination through a process called apomixis. We'll go with that one, where the tree produces viable asexual seeds that are clones of the mother tree. This is great if there's only ever one tree, but is a problem if a disease ever came through because it would completely wipe them all out since they're just clones of each other. All pretty easy to explain, but how about we talk about the forces of nature, 3 of them being depicted as masculine, while Enamorus is depicted as being feminine, each of them representing the 4 symbols, 4 auspicious beasts, or 4 cardinals in their Therian forms. Tornadus represents the vermilion bird, Thunderous, the azure dragon, Landorus, white tiger, and Enamorus, black tortoise. Their roles can be associated with Taoist ideals once more, then tying to yin for feminine and yang for masculine. Azure dragon Landorus for masculine, white tiger Landorus for feminine, vermilion bird Tornadus for masculine, and then black tortoise Enamorus for feminine. This would then further explain why Landorus stands out amongst the 2 masculine ones that fight each other all the time. Then why Landorus and Enamorus can be associated with each other, fully balancing out the quartet with complete masculine and feminine energy. Which, alright, I'm slowly being bought more and more by these Pokemon, and I'm slowly getting an intense itch to dedicate a video to them. So, keep your eyes out. It might be another month, but we'll see. More counterparts, we have Grimmsnarl and Hatterene, with the former being all male, while the latter is all female, despite both being inspired by witches from The Wizard of Oz through the Wicked Witch and the Good Witch and their depicted colors. Now, on one hand, I can understand that making the Good Witch the pastel-colored, bubbly, and feminine Pokemon was an easy and quick choice to make, but why make Morgrem male? Was it just a choice to act opposite to the bubbly witch that will beat me to death if I have a strong emotion? Well, it's about as simple as it looks, because while Hatterene is very much a Seelie Fae, Grimmsnarl would represent Unseelie Fae, but that is not to say that either of these Fae categories are strictly male or female. In fact, there's not only plenty of male and female figures on both categories of Seelie and Unseelie, but also many androgynous figures as well. But, at least within Pokemon, they seem to want to depict that bright and cherry association of the Seelie with feminine, while the dark and scary would be the Unseelie and would be masculine, again, thus Seelie and Unseelie. Because, you know, nothing screams silly, Seelie Fae quite like a Pokemon that brutally murders you while giggling to herself. We also have the depiction of a goblin here with Morgrem, and considering goblins are often depicted as filthy, underhanded, all-male creatures, then that would be the other tie to why Grimmsnarl is all-male. Although I'll be real, Grimmsnarl is one of the few Pokemon that I actually regret never catching when I first played through Pokemon Shield. One of these days I need to Nuzlocke it and pray that I have the luck to get one as my Pokemon, because the entire concept of using hair as muscle fibers is just too cool to me. Also, I do stream here on YouTube and Twitch, so come join along. It's like every Friday that I stream. But this then plays into the final stereotype of lithe and shapely Hatterene versus big and muscular Grimmsnarl, even though both of them are actually small creatures just wrapped up in their own hair. Shout out to all the short kings and queens out there. I'm only 5'6", so, you know, not even close to average myself. But my fiance is slightly shorter than me, so it worked out. I'm going to solve Alcremie with a singular word. Milk.
that's why they're all female. Seriously though, there's no specific thing I can think of. It turns into a wedding cake as well with its Gmax form, and it was released in Galar, so that was all planned from the start. I suppose wedding cakes can be more strongly associated with feminine qualities since women think more about weddings, apparently. I don't know, man. I grew up thinking about getting married and found it weird when other men weren't excited at all to find their significant other one day and get married. I'm just going to move on from this one. It took us long enough, but we are on one of my favorite non-legendary Pokemon that just so happens to be an all-female species, the tiny gremlin with the massive hammer, Tinkaton. And this all just likely boils into a long-standing reference of small girl with big hammer, or literally any full-grown woman who is small with a giant weapon. Rebecca from Cyberpunk, the Revenant in Elden Ring Night Rain, Amy Rose, May in Guilty Gear, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Take small character, give them massive weapon, and almost every single time it is a lady because it's really funny and it's a really simple trope at the end of the day. And that is it. That is likely the only reason Tinkaton is an all-female species, though I will say that she also makes me think of intelligent tinkerers as a trope as well, such as Mei Hatsume or Winfrey Rockbell, so that may play a part as well, and I'm totally bought. Our finale is a quartet, as we have one of my top 3 favorite Pokemon, Ogerpon, and the Loyal 3. They don't count as my top favorite. Don't mistake that. Now, Ogerpon is strictly female, while the Loyal 3 are strictly male. There are only one of each known in existence. We can make the assumption that whatever Pokemon the Loyal 3 originally were can be other genders, but these 3 specific ones are male. But why make this deliberate decision? Well, it does go back into the simple tale of Momotaro, the Peach Boy, because in this story, a boy is born from a peach and travels alongside a monkey, a dog, and a pheasant who can speak the human language. Together, they defeated the demons that had arrived at Onigashima Island to terrorize the people there. Funny enough, when we look at the map of Kitakami, we see the same mountain that would be depicted within Momotaro, Oni Mountain in Pokemon, which of course then is Onigashima Demon Island. But instead of that story, we have Ogerpon arriving separately with her trainer. Meanwhile, Petrunt is a selfish individual who travels with the Loyal 3, attacking Ogerpon and her trainer to take away the masks, terrorizing them, of course. At the end of the day, this is as it has often been regarding traditional genders and roles within Pokemon. They have simply been flipped, with our hero being female, while Momotaro is an antagonist in the form of Petrunt, as we see as a gender unknown or genderless Pokemon, and then the Loyal 3 being given the male gender. Surprised though, because we do have some honorable mentions, as there are single gender forms, such as Pikachu in a cap, which is just Ash's Pikachu, or Battle Bond Greninja, once again being Ash's Greninja. Then there's Pokemon like Blood Moon Ursaluna, who just ended up being a random male Ursaluna who survived the distance and many years to become what it is now in Kitakami. To follow, all cosplay Pikachu and the spiky-eared Pichu, who are female but are unable to breed. In fact, none of these Pokemon can breed except for Blood Moon Ursaluna, apparently, which is a wild thing to say, but it does just result in a regular Teddiursa being born if you were curious, and no, it does not get the Blood Moon effect. Lastly, there's Terapagos, who is programmed within the games to have an equal chance of being male or female, but the one we catch is fixed to be male every single time. This effectively makes it so no female Terapagos is available, but then also tells us that despite it being a legendary Pokemon, it is still just another species capable of breeding, at least in lore. But with that then, we have finally discussed every gender-exclusive Pokemon. If you enjoyed, make sure you subscribe and check out other videos on this channel, as I'm sure you'll love them since you made it this far. I want to thank members of the channel, as you see on screen here. Their extra support makes a massive difference and gives me the time I need to make quality content for everyone. If you want early access to videos, behind the scenes info, and members exclusive videos like this list here, then become a member for as little as $3 a month. I need to put out a vote for members to help choose a new members only video really soon as well, because I make those once a month. Once again, let me know your favorite Pokemon out of this list. Tinkaton and Ogerpon are mine without a doubt, as I even have my little Ogerpon plush right up there. I forgot to grab it for the video. Oh well, she's just perfect and I love her. But not only do I love reading comments, but they also appease the almighty algorithm alongside likes and hyping the video. Lastly, one of the best comments from this past week was from Electrocast, which answered a question on my older video ranking every Pokemon by edibility, which admittedly doesn't perfectly run by real-world edibility, but oh well, maybe I'll just remake it one of these days. But they say, the one food I would eat for the rest of my life if I could only eat one, potato. The funniest part about me always giving this answer is that in Pokopia, my favorite Pokemon's habitat involves potatoes, Jolteon. Which got me thinking about the entire science experiment involving using a potato to make electricity, and I love this connection. In fact, you have to have lots of electricity and make fried potatoes as part of a habitat to attract Jolteon, so it does involve potatoes as Electrocast states, but it does take it a little bit further, but it's still an amazing connection overall. But that is all for today. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.